They lost everything before the sun came up there. Ports. Their bonds, their immunity, and she never raised her voice. They thought the collapse came from the market, from regulators, from bad timing. No, it came from one woman they never bothered to learn. Her name is Ysoria Bellweather. They called her a clerical trustee, a placeholder, someone who files papers and pours coffee while real power speaks. They laughed as they erased her. Covenant. They joked while they stole her. Time. They didn't know they were invalidating their own. Empire. Because Ysoria Bellweather was never watching the headlines. She was watching the footnotes. When she adjusted her black onyx cameo ring, she wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about priority. About inter-creditor law, about a standstill clause they violated without noticing. One error, one buried lien, one clock. They restarted themselves. In the next 60 minutes, you will see how silence can bankrupt arrogance. How paper can shut down ports. How the woman they ignored became the one who owned the debt beneath their feet. Stay. This isn't drama. This is instruction. They call her a placeholder, not to her face, never directly. They say it sideways. In glances. In the way their eyes move past her and land on the next louder voice. The room is colder than it should be, not because of the air conditioning. Because old money prefers people slightly uncomfortable. The mahogany table stretches longer than necessary, polished to a mirror sheen that reflects chandeliers no one remembers choosing. The wood smells faintly of oil and age and decisions that have outlived the men who made them. Leather chairs creak with inherited confidence as executives shift their weight, crossing ankles, loosening ties, claiming space that has always belonged to them. Ysoria Bellweather sits at the far end, not centered, not framed, placed. Where attention thins out, her chair is the same as theirs, but it might as well be temporary in their minds. Something borrowed, something easily removed when the meeting ends. Her posture is upright, spine straight without stiffness, hands resting calmly on the table's edge. The black onyx cameo ring sits heavy on her right hand, its brushed gold band catching a fragment of chandelier light, then releasing it without drama. No one comments on it. They notice. They always do. A man 2 seats down clears his throat and says her name incorrectly. Not loudly, casually, as if precision would be wasted on her. She does not correct him. Her eyes stay forward, low set, unblinking, absorbing the room the way a ledger absorbs ink. The clock on the wall ticks once every second. It is louder than it should be. A mechanical heartbeat counting time no one in the room believes belongs to her. The agenda moves on without pause. Pages slide across the table. Thick paper, embossed headers, signatures already rehearsed. The documents pass around her. To her left, to her right, never placed in front of her. Hands reach across her line of sight without acknowledgement. Cufflinks flashing, watches heavy enough to bruise, if swung. Someone laughs, a soft sound. Confident. They talk about acquisition, timelines. About legacy infrastructure, about how clean the absorption will be once the final approvals are rubber stamped. Ysoria Bellweather listens. Not politely, precisely. She listens the way her grandfather taught her. For absence, for imbalance, for what should be there and is not. Her pulse is steady, her breath shallow but controlled. The room smells like leather and citrus cologne and something metallic beneath it all. Fear, maybe, or rust. A projector hums to life. Numbers bloom on the screen. Debt stacks, refinancing structures, subordinated tranches, neatly color-coded, simplified for confidence. Someone points with a pen, tapping twice for emphasis. This is where the power lives. They think. Ysoria's gaze drops to the reflection of the screen in the polished table. She does not need to look up. The numbers mean less to her than the footnotes they rest on. She feels the familiar pressure of the ring against her finger and rotates it once, slowly, the cameo's carved profile turning inward toward her palm. She remembers. Another table, smaller, scarred. Her grandfather's hands were always stained with ink. Not from writing letters, but from correcting them. He taught her that wealth screams but paper whispers, that everything loud is already late, that real power is usually filed under something boring. Asterisk. They never owned buildings. They owned the right to interrupt them. The voice at the head of the table rises. Graham Whitlock III. He speaks like someone accustomed to being recorded. Each sentence lands as if an audience waits just outside the door. He leans back, folding his hands over his stomach, satisfied. He says the word clerical, not as an insult, as a classification. Ysoria feels it brush past her without touching. Labels only matter when they stick. This one slides off cleanly. Document finally lands in front of her, accidentally. A young associate flushes and murmurs something that sounds like sorry, then retreats into silence. Ysoria does not look at him. She looks at the paper. The weight of it tells her more than the text. This is not a draft. This is final. The ink is set. The margins are tight. Too tight. Her eyes move, line by line, clause by clause. She hears the meeting continue above her. Voices overlapping, confidence stacking on confidence. She tunes it out. The world narrows to black text on cream paper. She reaches the section header and pauses. Her finger stills. The ring presses into her skin. The clause is missing. Not altered, not rewritten, gone. Her pulse jumps once. Sharp, like a wire pulled too tight. She inhales through her nose, slow, controlled, tasting old paper and something sweeter beneath it. The absence is surgical, deliberate. Someone thought they were cleaning up, streamlining, erasing. Redundancy. They erased a hinge. Ysoria. Does not react. She does not lift her head. She does not frown. She does not breathe faster inside. Something settles into place. A familiar weight. Not anger. Recognition. The moment when a puzzle stops being abstract and becomes personal. Her grandfather's voice surfaces calm and certain. If they remove it, it means they never understood why it was there. She slides the document back into the center of her space, aligning it perfectly with the table's edge. The ring flashes once as her hand moves. Across the table, Graham Whitlock III continues speaking, unaware that his foundation has just been measured and found. Eager, Ysoria Bellweather looks up for the first time. Her eyes meet the room. No challenge, no plea, just presence. The ticking clock sounds louder. Now, she says nothing, and the meeting moves on. Silence follows her gaze. Not the dramatic kind, the institutional kind, the kind that settles. In when people assume nothing important just happened. When power believes it is still alone in the room. Chairs shift. Someone clears their throat again. A pen taps twice against a legal pad. Impatient. The projector hums on, obedient, spilling more numbers across the wall. Ysoria Bellweather lets her eyes drift back down. She does not mark the page. She does not ask a question. Asking would imply uncertainty. And uncertainty is a luxury she never learned to afford. Her thoughts move carefully now. Not fast, never fast. Speed belongs to amateurs and men who mistake motion for control. She reconstructs the missing clause from memory, not word for word, but function for function. She feels where it should anchor, where it should bind, where it should interrupt the entire structure if removed. Improperly, this was not a mistake. Mistakes leave fingerprints. This leaves competence. Someone assumed the clause had expired. Someone assumed the underlying covenant had dissolved with time, buried under refinancing and modernization and renamed entities that sound nothing like the original holders. Someone assumed no one still tracked paper this old. They assumed she didn't exist. Her fingers curl slightly, pressing the cameo ring into her palm. The carved onyx face is cool, grounding. The ring belonged to her grandmother before it was hers, worn through meetings where women were allowed to listen but not speak. It has learned patience. It has learned wait. Across the table, Graham Whitlock III smiles as if concluding a speech already applauded somewhere else. He speaks about efficiencies, about confidence from lenders, about how legacy structures can finally be cleaned up now that younger, sharper minds are in charge. Legacy, the word tastes different to Ysoria. He means obsolete. She means binding dot. She watches him the way one watches a bridge, while testing load limits. Calm, curious, detached, she notices the looseness in his language. The way he says finalized when he means assumed. The way he says extinguished when he means ignored. The clock ticks second by second. The meeting spends time it does not realize has already been reassigned. A document packet slides past her again. This time she reaches out and stops it. Just one finger. No urgency. The movement is small but deliberate enough to draw a flicker of attention. The associate hesitates, then releases the stack. Ysoria flips one page, then another. She is not searching now. She is confirming. There it is. The reference number remains, a ghost of a clause. A citation pointing to something that no longer appears in the body text. Sloppy, not legally fatal on its own, but revealing. It tells her exactly how this deletion happened. Automated revision software. Bulk cleanup. No human eyes trained to look backward far enough to catch the fracture. She exhales slowly. This is not an attack. This is an invitation. She closes the packet and slides it back into the flow. No one thanks her. No one notices. Good attention would only complicate things at this stage. Power works best when it believes it is uninterrupted. Her mind moves outward now, beyond the room. Beyond this table, she maps the covenants reach across jurisdictions, the ports, the municipal bonds, the inter-creditor agreements layered like sediment, each one relying on the assumption that the one beneath it, settled. It isn't, it never was. Her grandfather never trusted resolution. He trusted continuity. He taught her that certain clauses are not meant to be exercised. They are meant to be preserved. They exist so that when arrogance grows careless, something older can step forward and remind it of gravity. The meeting begins to wind down. Voices soften. Chairs scrape. Decisions are summarized as if they are already history. Someone jokes about drinks afterward. Someone else checks their watch, satisfied. Ysoria Bellweather remains seated, just she feels the temperature of the room shift as bodies rise. Warmth replaces the earlier chill. It feels almost intimate now, like the afterglow of a performance. Graham Whitlock III gathers his papers, nodding to people who matter in ways he recognizes. He does not look at her. That is fine. As the room empties, she stands last. Her movements are unhurried. The sound of her chair sliding back is quieter than expected. She straightens her jacket, smooths the cuff at her wrist, and for a brief moment, the black onyx cameo ring catches the light again. It looks almost ceremonial. She gathers nothing. She leaves nothing behind. The missing clause is already where it needs to be. Not on paper. In motion, as she steps into the hallway, the noise of the building resumes around her. Footsteps, distant phones. The low murmur of people who believe tomorrow will look like today. Ysoria Bellweather pauses once. It's just long enough to rest her hand against the cool stone wall. Her pulse has returned to normal. Her breathing is steady. There is no triumph yet. Only alignment. One clause is missing, and now she knows exactly who forgot. The file surfaces quietly, not announced, not celebrated. It appears the way truth often does in institutions like this, accidentally, through someone young enough to still believe accuracy matters more than survival. The junior associate's voice trembles before the words do. He is seated 2 rows in, close enough to power to feel its heat, far enough to know it can burn him without consequence. His suit is new, his tie slightly off-center. The kind of man who triple checks footnotes because he has not yet learned. Which ones are dangerous to notice? I may be mistaken, he says, already retreating. But there appears to be a discrepancy in the archival version. The room shifts, not dramatically, subtly. A silence passes over the table like a shadow from a cloud no one acknowledges. Graham Whitlock III does not look at the associate. He smiles at someone else. Someone important. Someone safe. Those files have been reconciled, Whitlock says smoothly. We went through several iterations. Early drafts can be misleading. The associate nods too fast. His ears flush. He glances down at his notes, then up again, caught between what he saw and what he is being told he did not. I see, he says. I must have misread it. The discrepancy disappears, retracted, neutralized. The meeting exhales and moves forward. Relieved to return to certainty. No one asks what the discrepancy was. No one wants to know. Curiosity is expensive in rooms like this. Ysoria Bellweather says nothing. She does not look at the associate. She does not look at Whitlock. Her gaze rests instead on the table, on the faint scratches near her hands, on the reflection of her own face warped slightly by polished wood. She feels the shift before she understands it. A pressure change. The moment when fear passes from one person to another without ever being named. Her ring rests against the grain of the table. The onyx is cool, anchoring. She has seen this before. Different room, different decade. A law office in New Orleans. Heavy with humidity and caution. A young clerk stumbling over a phrase he was not supposed to see. Her grandmother closing a ledger without comment, then requesting a copy later. Not then, later. Always later. Requesting is not confrontation, it is record. Creation, Ysoria lifts her eyes just enough to catch the associate's profile. His jaw tightens. He swallows. He knows something slipped. He does not know how far. She waits until Whitlock finishes his thought. Until the sentence lands. Until power believes it is uninterrupted again, then she speaks. Just once. May I have a copy of the file? Ysoria Bellweather says. Her voice is level, unremarkable for my records. The room pauses, not because of the request, because of the calm. Requests made without explanation unsettle people. They create questions no one wants to ask aloud. The associate looks relieved, grateful. Whitlock tilts his head, considering. Of course, he says. Transparency is important. He smiles as he says it. As Ysoria nods once. Nothing more, the file arrives later that afternoon. Not directly. Routed through channels. Sanitized by process. Delivered in a plain folder with no markings, beyond a barcode and a date. Her office is smaller than theirs. Intentional, narrow windows. Thick walls. Shelves lined with binders no one has opened in years. The air smells like paper and lemon oil and something mineral. Beneath it all, she closes the door. The sound is decisive. Ysoria Bellweather sits and opens the folder slowly, as if time itself might react to haste. She removes the file and sets the folder aside. Her fingers brush the ring as she aligns the pages. She does not read yet first. She listens. The building hums around her pipes, distant footsteps. The muted whir of elevators carrying people upward toward importance. Somewhere a printer coughs to life. She exhales. Then she reads. The discrepancy reveals itself immediately, not in the text. In the formatting, the margins are inconsistent. The spacing between clauses varies by fractions of an inch. Subtle, almost elegant. Enough to fool anyone not trained to notice absence. Ysoria's pulse quickens. Just once. This file has been touched, reopened, altered. She flips to the metadata page. The one no one bothers to delete because no one thinks to check it. Revision history. Author tags. Software fingerprints. There it is. A watermark. It's not visible to the naked eye. Embedded. Institutional. A digital signature that marks the hand that made the change. It tells her not just that the file was altered, but where. Which department? Which system? Which clearance level? Her lips pressed together. Not satisfaction, recognition. This was not done by legal, it was done by infrastructure compliance, the very department that answers directly to Graham Whitlock III. She leans back in her chair, the leather sighing softly beneath her weight. The revelation does not excite her. It steadies her. This is the moment she always waits for. The moment when speculation ends and certainty begins. The antagonist's power is already compromised. Not publicly, not yet, but structurally. She closes her eyes briefly and lets the implications unfold. Infrastructure compliance does not alter files unless instructed. They do not improvise. They execute. That means the deletion was intentional. And that means the people responsible believed the covenant to be neutralized completely. They did not understand its function that makes them dangerous and vulnerable. Ysoria rises and moves to the window. Outside, the city continues unaware. Traffic crawls. Horns blare. The machinery of modern life hums along, resting unknowingly on agreements signed by men long dead. She thinks of inheritance law, of how obligations transfer even when memory does not, of how fiduciary duty does not expire, simply because someone wishes it had. Her grandfather used to say that the most arrogant thing an institution can do is assume it knows its own foundation. She turns back to the desk, the black onyx cameo ring glints as she reaches for a legal pad. She writes nothing yet. She only dates the page. Precise, clean. This file was never meant to be opened. Not by her, not by anyone who would understand what it revealed. They believed pressure would erase the problem. They believed silence would do the rest. They did not anticipate someone trained to see retraction as confession. Ysoria Bellweather closes the file and places it back into the folder. She does not mark it. She does not copy it. Not yet. There is power in restraint. Evidence matures when allowed to exist. Discovered. She locks the folder away. The key clicks softly. Her hand lingers on the lock for a moment longer than necessary. The ring presses into her skin again, grounding her. This is no longer theoretical. The trap is forming, quietly, legally. Inevitably, somewhere in the building, Graham Whitlock III is likely celebrating progress. He believes the dangerous paper is gone, that the problem has been resolved. He is wrong. The watermark has already spoken. Night settles into the building. Differently, once the offices thin out. The air cools. The hum lowers. Sound becomes selective. Ysoria Bellweather remains at her desk long after the hallway lights dim to half power. She does not rush. Rushing would suggest urgency. Urgency would suggest reaction. She reviews the file, again, slower this time. Her eyes trace the altered sections, not for content, but for intention. She reads the choices, the spacing decisions, the subtle reordering meant to disguise omission as optimization. She can almost hear the internal meeting where someone said the language was redundant, where someone else nodded, where Graham Whitlock III likely waved a hand and moved on to something louder. They thought the system would protect them. They forgot systems. Remember? As Araya's fingers tighten slightly around the folder edge. Not from anger, from focus. The pressure travels up her forearm, grounding her in the present moment. This is the part of the process she respects most. The confirmation phase. The point where intuition is tested against structure. She stands and walks to the shelves lining the wall. Binders labeled in her handwriting stare back at her. Dates instead of names. Jurisdictions instead of companies. She pulls one free. Heavy, dense, alive with precedent. She places it beside the file and opens both. Her breathing slows as patterns emerge. The altered clause was never meant to stand alone. It cross-referenced an inheritance provision tied to sovereign port deeds executed under conditions no longer practiced but never revoked. That matters. It matters because modern entities inherit obligations whether they acknowledge them Or not, corporate memory is selective. Law is not. Ysoria Bellweather sits again. Posture unchanged, as if hours have not passed. She feels the fatigue begin at the edges. Not exhaustion. A dull awareness that time is moving and she is moving with it. She welcomes it. Fatigue sharpens her. It strips away anything unnecessary. Her ring taps the table once. Soft, deliberate. She thinks of the associate. His hesitation. The way his voice faltered before the retraction. That moment was not weakness. It was conditioning asserting itself. Institutions teach compliance faster than they teach comprehension. She does not blame him. She thanks him silently. The watermark remains visible in her mind even after she closes the file. Infrastructure compliance. Direct authority. No plausible deniability. If exposed prematurely, it would alert them. If revealed too late, it would be redundant. Timing is everything. She checks the calendar. Not the digital one. The paper planner she keeps precisely because it cannot be edited remotely. Dates are circled. Lines drawn. Certain days are marked as heavier than others. They're data. Regulatory review window tied to the municipal bonds. Whitlock's firm recently absorbed public routine. Mandatory. That is where the record must surface. Not as an accusation. As a requirement, she smiles faintly. Not satisfaction. Alignment, this is how institutions fall. Not with a spectacle. With procedure. Ysoria Bellweather begins drafting notes. Not arguments, questions. Questions force disclosure. Disclosure creates records. Records create leverage. Her handwriting is small, controlled. Each word is placed as carefully as a clause. Her wrist aches slightly. She welcomes the sensation. Physical reminders keep her anchored. She rolls the ring once more, feeling the carved edge press into her skin. Her grandmother used to say, silence is not emptiness. It is storage. Ysoria understands that now more than ever. The building is nearly empty when she finally stands again. She locks the file back into place, checks the drawer twice, and straightens the desk. There will be no trace of urgency here. Anyone walking in tomorrow would see only order as she steps into the hallway. The motion sensor lights activate in sequence, illuminating her path. Each light clicks on just before she reaches it. Predictable, responsive systems. Behave when you understand their rules. She exits into the night. The city greets her with cold air and distant traffic. Streetlights reflect off wet pavement. Somewhere, a siren fades into nothing. Ysoria pauses, pulling her coat tighter, the ring glinting briefly beneath the lamp. She looks up at the building she just left. Rows of windows are dark, silent, unaware of what has already begun. The file was never meant to be opened, but now that it has been, it will not close quietly. She turns and walks away, step steady, unhurried, carrying nothing but certainty. Old money always smells the same. Paper. Damp. Stone iron that has not seen light in decades. Ysoria Bellweather feels it before she sees it. The courthouse stands decommissioned but not abandoned. Its exterior scrubbed clean for public memory. Its interior left intact for the things no one ever meant to revisit. The air shifts as she passes through the secured door. Cooler, heavier. As if the building itself is holding its breath. Her heels echo once. Then again, each step sinks into sound that does not travel far. Stone absorbs noise the way institutions absorb blame. The lights flicker on in delayed sequence, fluorescent and tired, illuminating corridors lined with sealed offices and forgotten plaques. She moves with familiarity, not nostalgia. Orientation. Her grandfather brought her here once. Not as a tour, as instruction. He never explained what the vaults held in total, only what they represented: continuity, obligation, time that does not expire. Just because people do. The elevator groans as it descends. 1 floor, 2, below public record, below convenience. Her pulse slows as pressure builds in her ears. The sensation grounds her. This is where noise disappears. This is where paper speaks. The doors open onto a narrow passage. Iron bars, concrete walls stained with mineral runoff. The smell is unmistakable now. Ink aged past sharpness. Dust layered thick enough to dull edges. Moisture clinging to everything that once mattered. Ysoria. Bellweather slides her access card through the reader. The light blinks, pauses, then turns green dot. The vault waits rows of metal shelves stretch into shadow, each marked with hand-painted identifiers instead of barcodes. Jurisdictions, trust numbers, names that no longer appear on letterheads. The temperature drops another degree. Her breath fogs faintly. She removes her gloves. Bare hands matter here. Her fingers brush the black. Onyx cameo ring instinctively. The metal feels warmer than the air. Familiar, steady. She steps forward and begins walking the aisles slowly, reading labels without touching them. Bellweather family trusts sit exactly where they should. No gaps, no disturbances. That alone tells her something. This place has been forgotten properly. Neglect is safer than interference. She stops at a shelf marked only with a date. Her throat tightens. Just once. She pulls the box free. It is heavier than expected, the cardboard reinforced decades ago with twine and care. She carries it to the long table at the center of the vault and sets it down gently, as if weight alone might wake something. The lid resists before yielding dot inside. Folders rest in careful order, yellowed, annotated, alive. The scent intensifies. Old ink has a sweetness to it, almost metallic. Almost human. Her grandfather's handwriting appears on the first file. Immediate, undeniable. The slant. The pressure. The way certain letters lean into one another as if sharing secrets. Ysoria's pulse jumps. Her chest tightens. Not grief, recognition. He is here, preserved in loops of ink and margin notes. She exhales slowly. This is where he hid the dangerous things. Not out of fear. Out of respect. He believed some instruments should not circulate freely. That power left unattended becomes careless. That custody is an act of restraint. Ysoria opens the file. Her eyes move faster now. Not scanning, tracking. The language is dense, formal, intentional. Trust provisions layered with conditions. Meant to survive regime changes, corporate dissolutions, renamed entities. She traces references across pages, cross-checking dates against. Memory dot there, dot the lean dot, not loud, dot not highlighted, dot alive, dot her. Fingers still. The lien ties infrastructure. Usage rights to a sovereign deed executed under inheritance law that predates modern refinancing frameworks. It was never meant to generate revenue. It was meant to preserve priority. A silent anchor beneath louder claims. Her breath catches. Just once. They never extinguished it. They assumed time had done the work for them. They assumed modernization erased obligation. They assumed no one would remember where to look. Ysoria closes her eyes briefly and lets the implications settle. This lien does not need enforcement to matter. Its existence alone destabilizes the entire debt stack Whitlock's firm depends on. Every bond, every refinancing, every assurance of clean title rests on the assumption that this paper is dead. It is not. She presses the ring into her palm. Hard enough to feel pain. Physical sensation sharpens clarity. This is the moment. The hinge her grandfather built for her to find. She opens another folder. Then another. Each reference confirms it. The language has never been superseded. Never challenged. Never voided. It has simply been ignored long enough to be forgotten. That is not erasure. That is negligence. Ysoria. Bellweather straightens in her chair. The cold no longer registers. Her mind moves with quiet precision, mapping consequences outward. The lien triggers reversion clauses. The clauses invoke fiduciary breach if bypassed. Breach invites review. Review invites collapse. Not immediately, Inevitably, she understands now why the file alteration mattered. Why infrastructure compliance tried to clean the language. They sensed instability without understanding its source. They treated a foundation crack like cosmetic damage. She smiles faintly. The building creaks, somewhere above her, settling or remembering. Ysoria returns each folder carefully to the box. She replaces the lid, ties the twine exactly as it was. Nothing here should look disturbed. Custody is protection. As she stands, the vault seems smaller, not because it is changed, but because its contents have finally aligned with purpose. She carries the box back to the shelf and slides it into place. Her hand lingers on the metal edge. He knew she would come. The realization is quiet but profound. Her grandfather did not prepare her to fight. He prepared her to arrive at the right moment with the right knowledge and the patience to wait. Ysoria Bellweather turns toward the exit. The lien is still. Alive. Ysoria Bellweather does not rush back up the elevator. She waits for the doors to close fully before exhaling. The sound is quiet but final, metal sealing away centuries of obligation beneath her feet. As the lift begins its slow ascent, the pressure in her ears eases, but the weight in her chest does not. That weight is not fear. It is responsibility, the kind that does not announce itself. The courthouse above ground feels warmer. The air smells cleaner, scrubbed of damp stone and iron, but the scent of old paper lingers in her memory. It always does. Some things follow you once they are reawakened. She steps out into the corridor and pauses. Her reflection stares back from a glass panel. Long oval face, unblinking eyes, composed, untouched. If anyone passed her now, they would see only a woman leaving a building that no longer mattered. They would be wrong. The lien lives because it was never meant to be used impulsively. It was designed as a counterweight, not a weapon. Her grandfather understood that enforcement draws attention, but existence creates leverage. The difference is everything. As Ysoria walks toward the exit, her mind begins the quiet work of sequencing. Not strategy yet, validation. She replays the language in her head, clause by clause, confirming what she already knows. The lien is not symbolic. It is executable. It binds infrastructure usage rights to conditions that Whitlock's firm violated the moment they consolidated. Authority without reasserting inherited obligations. That matters because modern systems assume legacy issues were resolved long ago. Assumption is weakness. She pushes open the heavy courthouse doors. Daylight floods in, sharp and almost intrusive after the vault's muted glow. The city moves on the steps below her. Lawyers on phones. Couriers running late. People unaware they are standing on agreements older than their grandparents. Ysoria Bellweather descends the steps slowly. Each step feels deliberate, anchored. The ring catches sunlight now, no longer muted by stone and shadow. The onyx gleams briefly, then dulls again as her hand settles at her side. She does not hide it. She never has. Her grandfather once told her that the most dangerous documents are not the ones people destroy, but the ones they stop checking. He taught her that custody is not possession. It is vigilance extended across generations. She carries that lesson with her now, back in her car. An older model chosen for invisibility rather than status. She sits for a moment without starting the engine. The city noise hums around her. Horns, voices, life continuing without pause. She places both hands on the steering wheel and closes her eyes. The image of the lien resurfaces. Ink, margin notes. Dates written in a steady hand that never expected applause. Her grandfather did not design this for revenge. He designed it for correction. Institutions drift. Paper pulls them back. Ysoria opens her eyes and starts the car as she merges into traffic. She considers the next step, but only an outline. There is no rush. The lien has waited more than a century. It can wait a little longer. Timing will determine whether this ends quietly or catastrophically for the people who believed it no longer mattered. She will choose quiet. Quiet is more devastating. By the time she reaches the brownstone she calls home, the afternoon has shifted. Light angles differently across the street. She parks, exits the car, and pauses again, looking up at the building's restored facade. Nothing about it announces wealth. Everything about it announces intention. Inside, the silence is controlled, purposeful. She removes her coat and places it carefully on the hook. The ring remains. Always. Ysoria Bellweather moves to her desk and opens a clean notebook. Not the one she uses for notes, a different one. Reserved, she writes a single line at the top of the page. Leanne confirmed. Status active. Nothing else. No exclamation, no commentary. She closes the notebook. The lien is still alive. The hearing room is built to feel democratic, wide seating. Neutral colors. Microphones spaced evenly, as if sound itself should be shared fairly. Flags stand at attention behind the dais, fabric heavy with symbolism that has outlived its sincerity. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, flattening faces, erasing nuance. Ysoria Bellweather takes her seat without drawing attention. She does not arrive early. She does not arrive late. She arrives when the room has already decided who matters. Public hearings attract a particular kind of confidence, not the sharp kind, the performative kind. Executives who speak in sound bites, officials who nod in practiced rhythm, observers who mistake volume for relevance. Graham Whitlock III thrives here. He leans forward when he speaks. Palms open, voice warm with mock accessibility. He knows how to shape a sentence for laughter, how to soften arrogance into charm. When he mentions efficiency, heads nod. When he mentions modernization, pens move faster. Ysoria listens. She always does. Her hands rest folded in front of her. The black onyx cameo ring visible but unremarked. The onyx absorbs light rather than reflecting it, making the gold setting appear darker, heavier. It looks old, out of place, which is exactly why it belongs here. Whitlock reaches the portion of his remarks he enjoys most. Legacy. He chuckles lightly before saying it, as if the word itself is amusing. We can't let outdated legacy paperwork slow progress, he says, smiling at the panel. Some of these documents are held by administrative custodians who don't fully understand their original context. Laughter ripples across the room, not cruel, dismissive, the kind that reassures people they are on the correct side of history. Ysoria lowers her eyes. Not in shame. In calculation. She feels the laughter like a temperature change. Warmth spreading outward from the center of the room, leaving cooler pockets where attention does not linger. Her pulse remains steady. Her breathing remains slow. She has heard this language before. Dressed in different words across decades, administrative, custodian. It means invisible. It means harmless. Her grandfather once explained that institutions use diminutive language when they are afraid to acknowledge permanence. They prefer to shrink what they cannot control. Whitlock continues, emboldened by response. He gestures broadly now, confident. He speaks about growth corridors, about freeing capital, about the necessity of pruning obsolete obligations. Obsolete. Ysoria single quotes as fingers tighten almost imperceptibly. The ring presses into her skin. Physical sensation anchors thought. She lets the pressure ground her as she listens for what matters. He is not speaking off script. This is prepared, approved, which means the dismissal of legacy paperwork is intentional, not casual, not rhetorical. It is groundwork, language designed to frame future resistance as obstruction. She does not look up. Looking up would invite engagement. Engagement would grant him scale. Instead, she studies the grain of the table in front of her. The scratches, the subtle warping where moisture once seeped in unnoticed. Even polished surfaces remember stress. A cough interrupts the laughter. Brief, suppressed. Someone closer to the dais shifts uncomfortably. Ysoria registers it without reacting. Discomfort is information. Whitlock finishes his point with a smile. Progress requires clarity, he says. And sometimes clarity means letting go of the past. More nods. A few murmurs of agreement. Ysoria lowers her chin slightly more, letting the room forget her entirely. This is not withdrawal. It is positioning. Her grandfather taught her that silence works best when others believe it is empty. The panel chair thanks Whitlock and moves to the next speaker. A municipal consultant drones through prepared remarks. The energy drops. Attention scatters. Phones come out discreetly. The moment passes. Apparently resolved, Ysoria remains. Still. Her ring catches the light. Not dramatically. Accidentally. A shift of her hand. A slight adjustment of posture. The overhead lights strike the gold edge just long enough to reflect outward. A brief flare in an otherwise muted room. Someone notices. Not immediately, not consciously. A woman seated 3 rows back pauses mid-note. Her pen hovers. Her gaze narrows, drawn not to Ysoria's face, but to her hand. Recognition does not arrive as certainty. It arrives as unease. That ring, she has seen it before, not this one. One like it in a different room. A different decade. On the hand of a man who never raised his voice but never lost an argument. The memory surfaces uninvited. A closing meeting. A signature delayed. A deal that collapsed quietly after everyone thought it was done. The woman's pulse quickens. She looks again. Ysoria does not meet her eyes. The panel continues. Names are called. Statements made. The machinery of public process grinds on, unaware it has already been influenced. Ysoria listens with half attention now, her focus split between the present and the ripple spreading outward from that brief flash of gold. Recognition is contagious. Another observer leans forward slightly. An older man with a legal pad filled in tight, careful script. His eyes track the ring now, then Ysoria's face, then back to the ring. His jaw tightens. He knows what that style signifies. Custodial authority. Old trusts, not wealth control. He shifts in his seat, settled. He does not laugh at the next joke. His pen stops moving. Ysoria Bellweather remains silent. She allows the room to do the work for her. Whitlock answers a question from the panel with confidence intact, unaware of the subtle change in texture around him. He senses nothing. People like him rarely do. They are trained to measure power by response. Not by withdrawal, but withdrawal is happening now. Attention. Fractures, certainty thins. The laughter does not. Return. Ysoria finally lifts her. Eyes. Not to Whitlock. To the room. Her gaze is calm, unblinking. It does not accuse. It does not plead. It simply observes. The effect is immediate but understated. A few people look away. Others straighten unconsciously. She adjusts her hand once more. The ring glints again. This time, the recognition lands. A man near the aisle inhales sharply. He whispers something to the person beside him. The whisper does not travel far, but its weight does. It carries implication without explanation. That ring is not decoration, it is lineage. Ysoria lowers her eyes again. The hearing moves on, but something has shifted permanently. Whitlock does not notice yet. He is still speaking the language of dominance. To an audience that has begun recalculating, silence is no longer ignorance, it is warning. The room does not realize it has crossed a threshold. Public hearings rarely do. They are designed to feel linear, procedural, forgettable. People come, speak, leave. Words are recorded. Minutes archived. Life moves on, but some moments lodge themselves into the structure without announcement. This is one of them. Ysoria Bellweather feels it in the stillness that follows. Not silence, attention, a recalibration too subtle for microphones to capture. The audience no longer listens the same way. They are listening around Whitlock now, not to him. Power does not vanish all at once, it thins. Whitlock answers another question. Its cadence unchanged, but the rhythm no longer lands where he expects. The panel chair nods more slowly. A consultant scribbles, then stops. A staffer near the wall glances again at Ysoria's hands, then quickly looks away. Memory is doing its work. The woman who first noticed the ring does not write anything else for the remainder of the hearing. She sits perfectly still, eyes forward, replaying a moment from years ago when a deal collapsed without explanation. She remembers the same style of ring, the same calm posture across a table, the same silence that felt heavier than argument. She remembers how no one ever admitted what happened, only that it was final. Whitlock senses resistance now, but misreads it. He assumes fatigue, bureaucratic inertia. He pushes harder, leaning into confidence, emphasizing inevitability. He speaks of timelines, of approvals, of momentum. Momentum is fragile. Ysoria Bellweather does not move. Her stillness becomes contrast. Against his motion, against his voice, against his certainty. She does not need to speak. The room is already doing the listening she requires. Another panelist clears his throat before asking the next question. It is a small sound, but it carries hesitation. His wording is careful now, less affirming, more precise. Whitlock answers, but the answer lands flat. The laughter does not return. As the hearing draws toward its close, people begin to gather their things. Conversations spark quietly, off mic, half-formed. Eyes flick toward Ysoria, then away. No one approaches her, not yet. Recognition often precedes contact. She stands only when the chair formally adjourns the session. The movement draws attention despite itself. Chairs scrape, papers shuffle. For a brief moment, paths intersect. Whitlock passes within a few feet of her. He does not look at her face. He looks at the ring. Just for a fraction of a second. Something registers. Not understanding. Unease. Ysoria meets his glance calmly. No expression. No challenge. Just presence. The effect is immediate but unreadable. Whitlock looks away first, irritation flickering across his features before he masks it. He will think about this later. She gathers nothing. She leaves no card, no statement, no trace beyond memory. As she exits the room, the echo of her footsteps is lost beneath resumed chatter. But the shift remains. Outside, the air feels lighter. Sound returns to normal scale. Ysoria pauses on the courthouse steps, letting the door close behind her. The ring rests cool against her finger again, unremarkable to passersby. Inside, however, it has already done its work. She descends the steps without hurry. Silence has served its purpose. The covenant survives because no one remembers why it was written. Ysoria Bellweather understands this the moment she lays the documents side by side. The modern acquisition agreement is clean, confident, aggressive. It speaks in contemporary language. Efficiency, consolidation, optimization. Every word assumes the present has authority over the past. The older document says nothing of the sort. It is quiet, restrained. Its power lies not in what it claims, but in what it prevents. She sits at her desk as night settles outside. The city reduced to a low electric murmur beneath her windows. The lamp casts a focused circle of light across the paper. Everything beyond it disappears. This is how she prefers it. Narrow focus sharpens consequence. The subordination clause is embedded deep, referenced only once, never repeated. That was intentional. Repetition invites challenge. Singular placement invites neglect. It binds port usage rights to senior debt instruments issued under a financing structure no longer taught, but never repealed. Whitlock's firm absorbed the infrastructure. Its portfolio assuming priority transferred cleanly. It did not. Ysoria feels the shift in her body before her. Mind finishes articulating it. A tightening inner chest. A controlled inhale. This is not discovery. It is confirmation. the kind that turns patience into leverage. She traces the clause with her finger. The black onyx cameo ring presses lightly into the page. Her grandfather's logic is unmistakable. He designed this covenant to outlive memory, to wait. The clause requires reassertion during any material change in control. Whitlock never did it. Not because he forgot, because he never knew it existed. Ysoria closes her eyes briefly. The debt stack flashes through her mind. Bonds layered atop assumptions. Refinancing built on inherited confidence. Every level dependent on a foundation that has already cracked. Without the covenant honored. The entire structure floats unsecured. That means exposure. That means acceleration. She exhales slowly and sits back. The room feels colder now, as if the paper itself is drawing heat away. The clock on the wall ticks. Each second lands heavier than the last. Time has started moving again. Ysoria Bellweather does not act immediately. She never does. Action without sequencing is noise. What matters now is order. The covenant gives her authority, but authority must be introduced correctly or it will be challenged prematurely. Institutions resist force. They submit to process. She pulls a fresh legal pad toward her and writes one word at the top, subordination. Beneath it. She lists consequences. Not hypotheticals, certainties. Failure to reassert the clause constitutes breach of fiduciary duty under the original financing terms. Breach triggers mandatory disclosure obligations. Disclosure invites review. Review suspends refinancing. Suspension kills momentum. She feels her pulse quicken, just once. Not excitement, precision. The trap is not dramatic. It is procedural. Whitlock's greatest weakness has always been its need to move quickly and be seen moving. She remembers his laughter at the hearing. The confidence. The casual dismissal of legacy paperwork. He framed it as inefficiency. He did not realize he was announcing negligence. Ysoria's hand stills. This is why the covenant was designed to be forgotten. Because arrogance creates the conditions it cannot survive. Her grandfather trusted that. She stands and walks to the window. The city is alive with light, unaware of the recalibration taking place quietly above it. Ports operate. Ships unload. Infrastructure hums along on borrowed certainty. She presses the ring into her palm again. Physical sensation anchors intent. The acquisition violated the clause. The moment Whitlock's firm consolidated control without senior debt acknowledgement. That violation cannot be corrected retroactively, only disclosed. And disclosure changes everything. Banks hate uncertainty. Investors flee it. Ysoria turns back to her desk. She knows exactly when the clock will be heard. Not today. Not tomorrow. During audit review. During routine confirmation. When the question is asked by someone who does not know it is dangerous. She will make sure that question is asked, her grandfather used to say. The most effective traps are the ones your opponent springs themselves. She understands now what he meant. Whitlock believes the deal is done. It has only begun to fail. The realization settles fully as Ysoria Bellweather aligns the documents into a single stack. Past. Present. The weight feels different. Now, heavier, charged. The covenant is no longer dormant. It is active, even if no one else knows it yet. Activation does not require announcement. It requires a condition. The condition has already been met. She reviews the acquisition timeline again. Dates matter. Sequence matters. Whitlock's team moved fast to avoid scrutiny. In doing so, they skipped the only step that would have protected them. Reassertion, without it, seniority collapses. Debt meant to sit safely above risk sinks to the bottom overnight. That kind of inversion is catastrophic, but only when acknowledged. Until then, it is silent. Ysoria smiles faintly. Not satisfaction, recognition. She drafts a single memo, neutral, technical, boring, addressed to a compliance office that prides itself on thoroughness. She does not accuse. She inquires. She references the covenant by number only. No commentary. No interpretation. Questions force answers. Answers create records. Records become weapons. She seals the envelope and sets it aside. It will not be sent yet. Timing remains everything. She checks the calendar again. Audit cycle. Regulatory window. Perfect. Outside. The city's sound deepens as night progresses. Sirens, engines, distant voices. None of it reaches her. She is already operating beneath that layer. Whitlock will continue speaking confidently for days, weeks, maybe. He will not feel the shift until the first call goes unanswered. Until a lender hesitates. Until language changes from assurance to concern. The clock has started ticking. Quietly. Ysoria. Bellweather cleans her desk before leaving. This is not a habit. It is a ritual. Order reflects readiness. She places the documents into their designated folder, locks it, and returns it to the drawer that holds things meant to wait. The ring glints once as she closes it. She pauses, hand resting on the wood. Her grandfather's presence feels close tonight. Not sentimental, structural. He built this moment carefully, trusting time more than force. She honors that trust by doing nothing prematurely. As she turns off the lamp, the room darkens instantly, but her certainty does not. The covenant is alive. It has been alive the entire time. The only difference now is awareness. Not Whitlock's hers. She steps into the hallway and locks the door behind her. The sound is soft. Final. Tomorrow will look ordinary to everyone else. That is the point that the clock is moving and no one is watching it. Yet Whitlock will notice the silence first. Not immediately, not today. Silence always arrives disguised as normality. An email unanswered because someone is busy. A call returned later than expected. A meeting rescheduled without explanation. Individually meaningless. Together unmistakable. Ysoria Bellweather understands this rhythm because she has lived inside it her entire life. Systems do not collapse loudly at the beginning. They hesitate. They pause. They reassess without announcing it. She steps out into the night, knowing the covenant has already begun its work. The port financing agreement was designed in an era when infrastructure moved slower, when ownership changed hands less frequently, and when trust instruments were written to survive wars, recessions, and political realignments. That is why the subordination clause exists at all. It was not meant to block progress. It was meant to prevent reckless consolidation. Whitlock's acquisition did. It's exactly what the covenant anticipated. It moved too fast. It assumed immunity, without senior acknowledgement. Every downstream obligation now sits on unstable ground. The debt stack that once appeared layered and secure is, in reality, inverted. Seniority has been compromised. Priority confused. Responsibility misplaced. Banks will feel it first. Not as alarm as discomfort, eh? Compliance officer will reread a section that has not been examined in decades. A junior analyst will flag language they do not fully understand. A manager will ask for clarification instead of assuming precedent. That single pause will be enough. Ysoria Bellweather knows better than to intervene directly. Intervention creates resistance. Process creates inevitability. She has already placed the seed where it belongs. The system will do the rest. At home, she removes her coat and sets it aside. The ring remains. It always does. She pours a glass of water and drinks it slowly, grounding herself in the ordinary while extraordinary consequences unfold. Elsewhere, this is the part people never see, that there is no celebration, no adrenaline, only patience. She reviews the calendar once more before closing it. The audit window approaches. The regulatory review cannot be postponed. When the covenant surfaces there, it will not look like an attack. It will look like oversight correction. That distinction matters. Whitlock's firm will scramble to explain why the clause was never reasserted. They will argue intent. They will argue irrelevance. None of that will matter. The language is explicit. The obligation is clear. The failure is documented. Unsecured debt does not wait for a narrative. It accelerates. Ysoria. Bellweather turns off the lights and stands for a moment in the quiet, somewhere far from her control. A clock continues to move forward second by second, unnoticed by the man who believes he owns the future. He does not. He borrowed it, and the terms have just been recalled. Before dawn, the city belongs to systems, not people. Streetlights hum. Servers cool themselves in basements. Compliance portals reset their clocks. This is the hour Ysoria Bellweather prefers because noise has not yet learned how to lie. She sits at her desk, coat still on, hair precise, breath steady, and opens the secure portal she has memorized since childhood. Her fingers move without hesitation. The black onyx cameo ring rests against the glass surface, grounding her hand as if reminding her this moment was earned, not stolen. She does not rush. Rushing creates mistakes, and mistakes create witnesses. She reviews each document one final time, not for content, but for alignment. 3 jurisdictions. 3 notices. Each formatted differently, each compliant with local inheritance and Port Authority statutes. She checks timestamps. She checks routing codes. She checks nothing twice except her own intent. This is not revenge. It is correction. When she clicks submit on the first notice, nothing happens outwardly. No sound, no alert. Just a silent acknowledgement logged in a system that assumes compliance is boring. That assumption will cost them everything. The second filing goes through minutes later. Ysoria Bellweather watches the confirmation appear, then disappear behind layers of institutional abstraction. Priority reassertion is not dramatic. It is administrative. That is why it works. The notice references century-old port financing instruments still recognized under sovereign deed continuity provisions. Those provisions were never repealed, only forgotten. She knows exactly who will see this first. Not Whitlock. Not legal counsel. A mid-level risk analyst whose job is to flag anomalies without understanding their consequences. That analyst will hesitate. That hesitation will escalate. Ysoria feels the faint chill in her hands as the system logs the filing time. Cold always arrives before consequence. She rotates the ring once, feeling the carved edge press into her skin. Her grandfather used to say the most dangerous changes are the ones that look like routine updates. She submits the third notice just before dawn breaks. The sky outside lightens by a shade. Somewhere, markets prepare to open. Unaware that the foundation beneath their confidence has already shifted, when the markets open, confusion spreads faster than panic. Numbers flicker. Spreads widen without explanation. Automated systems pause to reconcile data that no longer aligns. Ysoria Bellweather watches none of it. She already knows the outcome. Priority reassertion forces a recalculation across debt stacks that assumed uninterrupted seniority. Banks do not like recalculation. They prefer certainty, even bad certainty. By mid-morning, internal alerts trigger quiet freezes. Lines of credit marked for review. Disbursements delayed pending clarification. No announcements, no headlines. Just silence where confidence used to be. Whitlock's firm feels it as resistance, not opposition. Calls take longer to return. Meetings reschedule themselves. Language shifts from declarative to conditional. Ysoria stands by the window, coffee untouched, listening to the building wake around her. Elevators rise, phones ring. Somewhere, an assistant explains that approvals are pending. Pending is the sound of power slipping. She presses the ring into her palm again, steady, deliberate. The flip has occurred. It made no sound by noon. Banks freeze lines completely. Not publicly, internally. Risk committees convene without inviting the executives who assumed immunity. The reasserted priority forces counsel to reread documents no one has touched in decades. That rereading changes posture. Questions replace assurances. Ysoria Bellweather receives no notifications. She does not need them. She knows how institutions behave when they are cornered by their own paperwork. They look for someone to blame, then for someone to call. Whitlock's phone lights up with missed connections that lead nowhere. Voicemail fills. Replies stall. The silence is surgical. Ysoria sits back at her desk and finally removes her coat. The ring catches a sliver of midday light, dark and heavy. She thinks of the hearing, of laughter, of dismissal. This is the response to that laughter. Not anger. Accounting, the irreversible turn never announces itself. It simply changes what is possible. Whitlock learns something is wrong when certainty evaporates. Not because anyone tells him, because no one does. His calls go unanswered by people who once competed for his attention. Meetings cancel themselves. Counsel asks questions instead of providing solutions. Ysoria Bellweather imagines his confusion without satisfaction. Confusion is educational. It forces attention inward. She reviews the filings once more, confirming receipt across all 3 jurisdictions. The clock now works for her. Each hour that passes deepens the breach. The reasserted priority cannot be ignored without formal action, and formal action creates records. Records attract scrutiny. She writes nothing. She sends nothing. Silence remains her instrument. The ring rests against the desk, unmoving. Her pulse is calm. This is the phase where arrogance exhausts itself trying to understand what changed, never realizing that change happened quietly, legally. And long before today, late afternoon brings the first indirect acknowledgement. A neutral inquiry from a compliance office asking for clarification on legacy priority language. Ysoria Bellweather reads it once and sets it aside. Response will come later, framed as assistance, not assertion. Timing remains critical. She looks at her reflection in the darkened window, composed, untouched. The city below continues as if nothing happened. Trucks move. Ports operate. Infrastructure hums on borrowed certainty. She rotates the ring once more, grounding herself in lineage. Her grandfather prepared her for this exact moment, not by teaching her aggression, but by teaching her restraint. Power that flips loudly invites challenge. Power that flips quietly rewrites reality before anyone notices. Whitlock is still speaking, still promising, still unaware that his authority has already been subordinated. That happens just before evening. A name surfaces in a document chain Whitlock finally reads closely. Not a company, not a fund. K-person, custodian of record, holder of priority. The full name appears unadorned and precise. Ysoria Bellweather. The realization lands without drama, but with weight. He says it aloud once, alone, testing the sound of it as if that might change its meaning. It does not. The day ends the way it began, quietly. Ysoria turns off her desk lamp and leaves her office without hurry. The ring glints once as the door closes. The clock has been ticking all day. Only now does he hear it. Whitlock does not sleep that night. Sleep requires the belief that tomorrow will obey expectation. That belief has been damaged, not shattered, but weakened enough to keep the mind alert. He stares at the ceiling of a room designed for rest and feels the subtle anxiety of someone who knows control has shifted but cannot yet prove it. Meanwhile, Ysoria Bellweather sleeps without disturbance. Her phone is silent, her calendar empty. She has no need to monitor outcomes in real time. The filings have entered systems older and more disciplined than any executive temperament. They will proceed according to rule, not persuasion. Morning arrives unevenly for Whitlock. It comes with a flood of delayed responses and carefully worded emails that say nothing while communicating everything. For Ysoria, it arrives as light through curtains, steady and indifferent. She rises at her usual hour, dresses in neutral tones, and fastens the black onyx cameo ring without looking at it. Some things no longer require confirmation. By mid-morning, the language has shifted again. Banks do not say frozen. They say under review. Counsel does not say breach. They say clarification required. The words soften the reality, but the effect is the same. Money pauses. Authority hesitates. Momentum drains. Whitlock finally asks the question he should have asked. Weeks ago, who holds priority? The answer arrives not as a person, but as a reference. A name embedded in filings that never drew attention because no one expected it to matter. He reads it twice, then a third time. The cadence unfamiliar. The weight unmistakable. Ysoria Bellweather, not. A firm, not a fund. A custodian. The realization is quiet, but devastating. Everything he dismissed as administrative now reframes itself as intentional. Silence was never ignorance. It was patience. The laughter at the hearing echoes back, stripped of humor. Across the city, Ysoria stands at her window again, coffee in hand. Watching infrastructure move as it always has. Ships still dock. Roads still carry traffic. Systems resist acknowledging change. Till forced dots, she does not force them. That is the elegance of it. The priority reassertion does not announce itself with alarms or headlines. It tightens, incrementally, inevitably. Every hour adds weight. Every unanswered call compounds exposure. Whitlock will eventually understand the full scope. Not today. Not tomorrow. Understanding arrives last, after consequences make denial impossible. Ysoria finishes her coffee and turns away from the window. The power flip is complete. It made no sound. The emergency board meeting is called without ceremony, no agenda, no pleasantries. Just a rush of messages marked urgent, followed by silence where answers should be. Executives arrive in fragments, some still on calls, others already arguing before they sit. The room smells like coffee gone cold. And panic trying to stay professional, voices overlap. Someone blames compliance, someone blames legal, someone blames timing. No one blames themselves. Graham Whitlock III stands at the head of the table. Jaw tight, fingers drumming once before he stills them. His confidence has thinned, but not yet cracked. He believes control can still be reasserted if he speaks loudly enough. Then he notices her Ysoria Bellweather sits at the far end, exactly where she was placed before she mattered. Hands folded, back straight. The black onyx cameo ring visible, but still. She does not check her phone. She does not review documents. She does not look around the room. She waits. The temperature feels wrong. Too warm or too cold. No one can agree. The clock on the wall ticks louder than usual, marking time that now feels expensive. Reports slide across the table. Debt exposure summaries. Bank notices. Internal risk alerts flagged overnight. Someone swears under their breath. Another executive's leg bounces uncontrollably. Ysoria Bellweather remains motionless. Whitlock clears his throat and begins speaking, but his words land unevenly. The room no longer bends toward him instinctively. Attention fractures. Eyes drift back to the documents, to the numbers, to the silence at the end of the table. She does not interrupt. Silence stretches. Not empty, weighted. The longer she says nothing, the more the room fills it for her. Each executive hears their own fear reflected back at them. Each pause magnifies the absence of reassurance. This is not a confrontation. It is exposure. The breaking point arrives without warning. A junior executive pushes back from the table abruptly. Face pale, hand clamped over his mouth. He barely makes it to the trash bin before retching. The sound cuts through the room like a rupture. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Someone stands halfway, unsure whether to help or pretend it did not happen. No one looks at him for long. They look at Ysoria Bellweather. She does not flinch. Her hands remain folded. The ring rests against her skin, dark and unadorned. She does not acknowledge the noise, the embarrassment, or the sudden vulnerability it exposes. Her stillness reframes the moment instantly. This is not chaos. This is a consequence. Whitlock feels it now. The subtle shift from leadership to liability. He tries to speak again, but the words stumble. His authority no longer fills the room. It ricochets, colliding with doubt instead of obedience. Someone asks about priority. Someone asks about reassertion. The questions are careful, measured, deadly. Ysoria Bellweather lowers her eyes slightly, not in deference, but in containment. She has no need to meet their gazes yet. Recognition is already spreading. One executive whispers to another. Not loudly, not meant to carry. But the room is too quiet now. We're underneath her, someone says. The words do not land as an accusation. They land as realization. A truth articulated too late to prevent it. Ysoria feels her pulse once, steady, controlled. This is the soundless moment her grandfather described. When power shifts hands without anyone standing up to announce it, Whitlock finally looks directly at her, not with anger, with calculation. He is trying to understand how. Someone he dismissed became the axis on which everything now turns on. She does not answer the look. Silence remains her instrument. The meeting disintegrates. Slowly, not with shouting, with fragmentation. Side. Conversations spark and die. Phones vibrate again, now ignored. Legal language creeps into casual speech. Fiduciary, exposure, liability. Words that strip away bravado and leave structure bare. Ysoria Bellweather listens without appearing. Her mind tracks each admission, each unguarded phrase that confirms what she already knows. They are trapped by their own paperwork. And the trap tightens with every sentence spoken aloud. Whitlock tries once more to regain command. He references timelines, remedies, negotiations. The room does not respond the way it used to. Confidence has an echo now. And the echo sounds hollow. Ysoria finally lifts her gaze. Not sharply, not dramatically, just enough. Her eyes move across the room. Not lingering, not accusing, observing, measuring. The effect is immediate. Several people look away. Others straighten unconsciously, as if called to order by something older than hierarchy. She says nothing, and that nothing carries more authority than any speech Whitlock has ever given. The ring catches the overhead light briefly. As she shifts her hands, the onyx absorbs it, the gold edge reflecting just enough to remind the room that this presence is not accidental. This is custodial. Power. Inherited. Preserved. The realization settles like dust after it collapse, slowly, completely. There will be no shouting match, no dramatic confrontation. The board understands now that outcomes are already in motion. Someone suggests adjournment. No one objects. The meeting ends without resolution. Executives file out in silence, avoiding one another's eyes. Some glance back at Ysoria Bellweather as they pass, unsure whether to fear her or thank her. She offers neither comfort nor threat. She remains seated until the room empties. Only then does she stand. Her movements are unhurried, composed. She gathers nothing, because nothing here belongs to her. The consequences will follow without her carrying them. Whitlock lingers near the door, wrestling with pride and necessity. He finally turns back, voice low. "Your name," he says. "I need your full name." Ysoria Bellweather meets his eyes for the first time. She gives it to him calmly, clearly, without emphasis. The sound of it lands heavier than any accusation. Asterisk. Understanding flickers across his face. Too late to matter. The clock has been ticking longer than he realized. The meeting was never the battlefield. It was the aftermath. Ysoria walks past him without another word. The room does not follow. The hallway outside the boardroom feels narrower than it did an hour ago. Sound behaves differently here. Footsteps echo longer. Doors close more carefully. Ysoria Bellweather moves through it without slowing, her posture unchanged, her expression neutral. She does not look back. Nothing behind her requires attention anymore. Inside the boardroom, the consequences begin organizing themselves. Whitlock remains alone for a moment longer, staring at the empty chairs as if they might offer an explanation. They do not. Authority has a shelf life. And his expired quietly while he was still speaking. Phones begin ringing again. This time, they are not invitations, they are demands. Compliance wants clarification. Banks want assurance. Counsel wants time. None of them can give what is being asked for. Priority has already been reasserted. That fact does not change. Because it is inconvenient why Ysoria reaches the elevator and presses the button once. The wait is brief, efficient. The doors open without ceremony. As she steps inside, the ring catches the mirrored wall, reflecting a darker version of itself back at her. She watches it for a moment. Not sentiment, orientation. This was always the end of this phase. The elevator descends smoothly. Floor numbers count backward. With each one, the noise above fades. The building does not know what has happened inside it. Buildings rarely do. They hold power without understanding it. Her mind moves forward now, not in strategy, but in sequence. The board meeting was not the climax. It was confirmation. The system has acknowledged the imbalance. Everything that follows will be processed. Process is relentless. By the time she steps outside, evening has settled. The city is loud again, alive, unconcerned. She blends into it easily. Quiet luxury has always been about invisibility when needed. Across town, emails circulate internally, with subject lines rewritten to sound less alarming. Risk committees reconvene. Language softens even as consequences harden. This is how institutions protect themselves. By delaying admission until the delay becomes. Damage. Whitlock will spend the night assembling explanations that no longer matter. He will argue context. He will argue intent. None of it will restore priority. Ysoria enters her building and locks the door behind her. The sound is firm, familiar. She removes her coat, sets it aside, and finally loosens her hands. The ring remains. It always does. She pours another glass of water and stands by the window, watching traffic below. Headlights stretch into lines of light. Movement continues uninterrupted. That is the irony of power flips. The world does not stop. Only direction changes. Somewhere. A file is being reread for the third time by someone who realizes too late that silence was never absence. It was custody. And custody has just asserted itself. Ysoria finishes the water and sets the glass down. Tomorrow will be quieter for her, for them. The noise has only begun. The trap does not announce itself with confrontation. It presents as procedure. Ysoria Bellweather understands this as she reviews the final confirmation packet delivered just after sunrise. The documents are ordinary in appearance. Standard notices. Standard references. Language designed to calm rather than alarm. That is why they work. Institutions are trained to respect paperwork that looks boring. The inter-creditor, standstill protection, sits at the center of it all. A clause meant to pause enforcement actions while refinancing negotiations remain active. It exists to prevent chaos, to give lenders time to coordinate without triggering collapse. Whitlock's firm violated it, not loudly, not maliciously. They continued internal restructuring while refinancing was technically unresolved. Assuming silence meant consent. That assumption voided the protection automatically. No hearing required. No opinion needed. The moment the standstill was breached. The covenant Ysoria holds activated auto-acceleration. The debt does not ask permission when it accelerates. It does not wait for argument. It responds to condition, not intent. Ysoria traces the language carefully, not because she doubts it, but because she respects it. This is the cleanest kind of authority. Mechanical, unemotional. Her ring rests against the page as she reads. The black onyx cameo ring feels heavier now, as if acknowledging its role in anchoring this moment. Her grandfather designed the covenant to behave this way, to eliminate debate, to turn arrogance into math. The accelerated debt invalidates the refinancing entirely. Without valid refinancing, the firm stands exposed. Liquidity evaporates. Collateral becomes claimable. Rights shift quietly from assumption to enforcement. No lawsuit is necessary. Lawsuits invite noise. This requires none. Ysoria sets the documents down and looks out the window. The city moves as it always has. Trucks idle. Sirens pass. Somewhere, ports prepare for another routine day, unaware that routine has already been revoked. Foreclosure rights arrive without spectacle. No officers, no cameras, just notices delivered through channels built for exactly this purpose. Port authorities receive updated instructions. Access permissions shift. Operating agreements pause pending clarification. Clarification never comes. The ports slow first, then they stop. Ysoria Bellweather learns of it indirectly, through a neutral update buried in a compliance digest. Terminal operations suspended. Cargo queues unresolved. Insurance coverage flagged for review. Each line reads sterile. But the effect is immediate and brutal. Infrastructure depends on confidence more than steel. Once confidence wavers, everything hesitates. Whitlock's firm scrambles to understand why enforcement rights are being exercised without warning. Counsel argues that negotiations were ongoing, that intent was cooperative, that no harm was meant. Intent does not matter. Standstill protections are binary. They exist or they do not. Once violated, the system does not negotiate. It executes. Ysoria sits calmly as messages circulate behind closed doors. She does not attend meetings. She does not answer calls. She has already spoken in the only language that matters, paper. The ring catches a muted reflection as she folds her hands. She feels no triumph, only alignment. This is how the system was built to respond when pushed beyond tolerance. Ports going dark ripple outward quickly. Shipping schedules fail. Insurance premiums spike. Municipal partners demand answers that Whitlock cannot provide. Every question circles back to one truth. The refinancing was never valid without it. The entire empire rests on unsecured debt. That is not a position that power survives. Ysoria allows herself one slow breath. The trap has closed. Not dramatically. Completely. Part 3 of 4 Whitlock's final appeals are procedural, not personal. He authorizes emergency calls, requests extensions, proposes interim agreements. Each effort is met with the same response. Review pending. Enforcement active. No deviation permitted. The system does not bend because it cannot. Ysoria Bellweather understands why this hurts more than confrontation ever could. There is no villain to argue with, no courtroom to perform in, only mechanisms responding exactly as designed. The covenant's acceleration clause does not threaten. It resolves. Foreclosure rights transfer quietly to the custodial authority. That authority does not need to appear on site. It simply changes what is allowed. Gates do not open. Systems do not authorize. Staff receive instructions that they cannot override. The ports remain still. That stillness speaks louder than any injunction. Ysoria reviews the timeline once more, not out of doubt, but out of habit. She confirms each step, each trigger, each response. Everything aligns. The standstill breach, the invalid refinancing, the acceleration, the enforcement. Clean. Unassailable. Her grandfather used to say the strongest moves leave no room for interpretation. This is one of them. Outside, the city reacts slowly. News has not caught up yet. It will. But by the time headlines form, the outcome will already be settled. Ysoria rises and prepares to leave her office. She does not carry the documents with her. They no longer belong to her alone. They belong to the system now. The ring glints once as she turns off the light. The trap is complete by evening. The reality becomes undeniable. Ports idle, contracts default. Confidence collapses inward. Whitlock's firm is no longer negotiating. It is surviving minute to minute. Every path forward leads back to the same obstruction. Custodial priority, accelerated debt, enforceable foreclosure rights. Ysoria Bellweather walks through her neighborhood as dusk settles. The air smells of rain and asphalt. Life continues around her, indifferent to the institutional collapse unfolding elsewhere. This is always the strangest part. The world does not pause for justice, it simply adjusts. She pauses briefly under a streetlight and looks at her hand. The black onyx cameo ring absorbs the glow, steady and unchanged. It has been present in every room where this was decided. Silent, observant. No lawsuit was filed, no press conference held, no spectacle staged, just paper obeying its own logic. Somewhere far from her, cranes sit idle at silent docks. Ships wait offshore. Schedules dissolve. The ports are not broken. They are paused, caught in the space between authority and permission. That pause will not lift without acknowledgement, and acknowledgement will cost everything. Why Ysoria turns and continues walking, untouched by the chaos now spreading through boardrooms and banks. The system has spoken. The trap has closed. The ports stop running. The stoppage does not look dramatic. From the outside, there are no explosions of sound. No sirens, no alarms that signal catastrophe to the public. The cranes simply remain still. The gates remain closed. Digital authorization systems refuse to validate new entries. What was once motion becomes delay, and delay hardens into paralysis inside Whitlock's firm. The atmosphere curdles. Conference rooms fill and empty without resolution. Lawyers argue over phrasing that no longer changes outcomes. Analysts redraw models that no longer converge. Someone suggests litigation as leverage, but the suggestion dies mid-sentence when the reality becomes clear. There is nothing to litigate. The standstill violation is factual. The acceleration is automatic. The foreclosure rights are enforceable. Courts are unnecessary when contracts perform their own conclusions. Whitlock finally understands the nature of the trap. It was never designed to punish him publicly. It was designed to remove him operationally. Every port under his control now answers to a custodial priority that cannot be overridden by negotiation. Insurance providers pull coverage the moment inactivity triggers risk clauses. Municipal partners demand continuity guarantees Whitlock cannot offer. Each demand compounds the last. Time compresses. Hours feel like minutes. Minutes feel expensive. Somewhere between the third emergency call and the fifth unanswered message, Whitlock realizes that the silence he dismissed was never weakness. It was preparation. Someone did not rush him. They waited for him. Across the city, Ysoria Bellweather remains absent from the noise. She does not attend emergency meetings. She does not issue statements. Her role is not managerial. It is custodial. Once enforcement begins, discretion is no longer hers. It belongs to the system. She receives a single confirmation. Update late in the evening. Operations paused. Priority enforced. Status unchanged. She closes the message. Without a reply, the ring rests against her finger. Warm now from the day's movement. It has witnessed boardrooms, vaults, hearings, and filings. It bears no mark of the damage unfolding elsewhere. That is its nature. Custody does not celebrate. The economic shock radiates outward next. Shipping firms reroute. Costs rise. Schedules slip. Traders ask questions no one wants to answer. The first rumor leaks into industry channels, then disappears under non-disclosure agreements and careful language. By morning, everyone who matters knows. The ports are not offline by accident, they are offline by authority. That distinction terrifies institutions more than chaos ever could. Chaos can be blamed. Authority must be obeyed. Whitlock authorizes one final strategy. He asks for the identity of the custodian again. Not the entity. The person. The human name behind the paper that dismantled his control. The answer comes. Back unchanged. Ysoria. Bellweather. No title, no firm. Just a name. He says it quietly this time. Not testing its sound, but acknowledging its weight. He understands now why no one returned his calls. They were not ignoring him. They were already beneath someone else. That realization breaks something. Internal dot. Not pride. Orientation. Power has direction. He misjudged its flow. Ysoria stands at her window as the city dims for the night. Rain begins to fall lightly, streaking the glass. The sound is steady, unhurried. She watches traffic slow, then stabilize. Systems adapt when forced. They always do. She thinks briefly of her grandfather, of the patience he modeled, of the restraint he demanded. He taught her that justice executed loudly invites resistance. But justice executed quietly rewrites the map before anyone can protest. This was never about humiliation. It was about correction. The ports will reopen eventually. Under new terms, new oversight, new respect for the paper everyone ignored. When they do, the world will continue as if nothing happened, but the lesson will remain. Silence is not absence. It is custody. And custody, when asserted, stops everything that refuses to listen. Ysoria Bellweather does not arrive with an entourage. No advisors, no lawyers whispering strategy. She enters the room alone, and the room adjusts itself around her without instruction. Chairs straighten, voices lower. The air feels denser, as if oxygen has been reassigned to something more important than speech. Whitlock is already seated. He looks smaller than he did weeks ago. Not physically, structurally. The confidence that once occupied space ahead of him now folds inward, contained, cautious. He has read the terms. He understands them. Understanding has not made them easier to accept. Ysoria takes her seat and places the folder on the table. She does not open it. That choice matters. Everyone in the room waits for her to speak. She does not. Silence stretches, not awkward, but instructional. It teaches them what this meeting is not. It is not a negotiation. Negotiation assumes leverage on both sides. That assumption is gone. Ysoria folds her hands. The black onyx cameo ring rests in full view. The light catches its gold edge briefly, then settles. No one looks away from it. Whitlock clears his throat. We appreciate your willingness to discuss terms, he begins. She lifts her eyes just enough to stop him. No words, no gesture. The interruption is absolute. He swallows and falls silent. His pulse betrays him now. A small tremor in the hand nearest the document. The room notices. Power shifts when people notice weakness and stop pretending they do not. Ysoria opens the folder. The terms are not punitive. That surprises them. They expected punishment, public humiliation, a spectacle designed to exact vengeance. What they receive instead is structure, precise, boring, ruthless in its restraint. Ysoria. Bellweather speaks calmly, evenly, as if explaining policy rather than dictating. Surrender, ports reopen under custodial. Oversight. Revenue flows are redirected until accelerated debt is satisfied. Executive authority is subordinated to compliance review. No. Bonuses, no discretionary. Movement. Every sentence lands like architecture. Whitlock listens with his head slightly bowed. Not out of submission, but calculation. He searches for flexibility. For a margin. There is none. The language leaves no room for interpretation. Every clause references an existing obligation. Nothing new is demanded. That is what makes it unassailable. She is not taking something from him. She is returning the system to its correct alignment. You retain operational involvement. She continues, voice unchanged. You do not retain control. No one challenges her. No one interrupts. This is not mercy. Mercy would imply emotional authority. This is custodial dominance, the kind that does not care how it feels, only that it holds. Whitlock's mouth opens, then closes again. He realizes something important in that moment. There is nothing to negotiate, 'cause nothing is personal. The room feels colder. Ysoria finishes speaking and closes the folder. Silence returns. Heavier than before, Whitlock's legal counsel shifts in his seat, already knowing the truth but needing to hear it aloud. These terms are final, he says carefully. Testing the words, Ysoria nods once. Yes. That single syllable ends the discussion. Whitlock stares at the signature line. His name looks unfamiliar there, as if it belongs to someone else now. His fingers hesitate. The hand that once signed acquisitions without review now shakes slightly. He understands what refusal means. Foreclosure. Resumes, ports remain closed. Insurance collapses. This is not leverage. It is gravity. He picks up the pen. The scratch of ink against paper is loud in the quiet room. Too loud, everyone hears it. The moment is not triumphant. It is final. Whitlock signs. His hand shakes as he does. Ysoria watches without expression. She does not nod. She does not acknowledge the act. She only observes that the system has accepted what was always required. The pen is set down. A man who once commanded. Infrastructure now holds nothing but a pen. He no longer needs. Ysoria Bellweather stands. That movement signals the end more clearly than any statement could. Chairs scrape back instinctively. People rise without instruction. The hierarchy has reordered itself. Whitlock remains seated for a second longer, staring at the document as if it might change if he looks at it hard enough. It does not. Ysoria gathers the folder. She does not thank anyone. She does not threaten anyone. She walks to the door and pauses. For clarity, she says, not turning around. These terms are not temporary. The room absorbs that. Then she leaves. The door closes softly behind her. Inside, the room exhales in fragments. Relief mixes with dread. They are still alive, but they are no longer in control. Outside, Ysoria moves through the hallway without urgency. Her posture is unchanged. Her breathing is steady. The black onyx cameo ring catches the corridor light one last time. Power has been redistributed. Quietly. The redistribution does not ripple outward immediately. It settles inward first, inside Whitlock's firm. The aftershock arrives as procedural emails and revised org charts that remove authority without announcing removal. Titles remain. Access does not. Cards still open doors, but permissions fail quietly in the background. People learn their limits not through confrontation, but through error messages that do not explain themselves. Whitlock remains in the boardroom. Long after Ysoria Bellweather leaves, no one joins him. The silence is different now, no longer tense. Resolved. He reads the document again, slower this time, as if repetition might soften its meaning. It does not. The structure is airtight. Every clause references something he signed years ago. Nothing here is new. Only enforced. He finally stands, feeling older than he did that morning, across the city. Ports begin reopening under revised authority. Not all at once. Staggered, controlled. Compliance teams oversee operations that once ran on assumptions. Every container logged. Every transfer verified. Efficiency slows, but stability returns. Markets respond with cautious relief. The system prefers obedience to speed. Ysoria Bellweather watches none of this directly. She spends the afternoon in familiar routines. Walking the streets she has always walked. Passing buildings whose foundations rest on agreements older than their facades. Quiet luxury is not the absence. It is continuity. Her phone vibrates once. A confirmation notice. Terms. Accepted enforcement proceeding. She does not respond. That chapter has closed. Whitlock learns the shape of his new reality through small humiliations. A meeting he once chaired now proceeds without him. A call he places routes through an assistant who apologizes without meeting his eyes. His influence still exists, but it is filtered, buffered, subordinated. This is worse than removal. It is containment. The people around him adjust quickly. They always do. Loyalty follows oxygen. Where resources flow, allegiance follows. Whitlock is still present, but no longer central. Ysoria Bellweather understands this better than anyone. She was raised around it. Around rooms where the loudest voice did not own the decision. Around tables where power waited patiently until it was needed. Evening settles again. She sits at her desk and removes the ring for the first time that day, setting it carefully beside her notebook. The skin beneath feels lighter without its weight. But she does not linger on the sensation. Objects serve moments. Moments pass. She writes one final line. Custody. Stabilized. Nothing else. No commentary. No. Flourish. That is enough. The city continues. Ports move again. Ships dock. Money flows under new rules. Whitlock signs documents for weeks afterward. Each one smaller than the last. Each one confirming the same truth. He was never destroyed. He was corrected. Correction lasts longer. Ysoria closes the notebook and replaces the ring on her finger. It fits exactly as it always has. The world has shifted, but she remains aligned. Control was never about volume. It was about structure. And structure, once asserted, does not need to speak again. Rain turns the city into a sheet of moving glass. It streaks down. Towers built to symbolize permanence, bending the lights inside them into long, trembling lines. From a distance, it looks like the buildings themselves are dissolving. Inside those towers, phones vibrate endlessly. Screens refresh with numbers that refuse to stabilize. Institutions fracture quietly, off-screen, where no camera is invited. Ysoria Bellweather stands in a hallway that has already forgotten them. The corridor is narrow and softly lit, designed for transit rather than presence. Marble beneath her feet holds the day's chill. The air smells faintly of cleaning solvent and old paper, the kind of scent that lingers in buildings that have seen too many decisions to care about the latest one. She does not move. Her posture is relaxed but exact. Shoulders level, chin steady. Long oval face unreadable, eyes fixed forward without tension. Mahogany skin catches the low light without reflecting it. She is untouched by the chaos unraveling floors above and streets below. Behind the walls, systems fail politely. Emails circulate marked urgent, then quietly downgraded when no solution appears. Emergency calls are rerouted, then dropped. Committees convene and dissolve into silence when they realize there is nothing left to debate. The collapse does not announce itself. It simply removes options one by one. Ysoria listens without listening. She feels the building settle, the way structures do when stress redistributes. The faint vibration of elevators slowing. The subtle absence of footsteps that once rushed past with purpose. Time stretches differently in moments like this. It becomes heavier, more deliberate. Her hand rests at her side. The black onyx cameo ring is steady on her finger. Victorian cut, catching just enough light to mark its presence. The gold setting is brushed, not polished, as if shine was never the point. The onyx absorbs the hallway's glow and gives nothing back. That ring has been in every room. Where this ended, not as a threat, as a reminder. Somewhere, far above her, men and women who once believed they controlled infrastructure stare at screens that no longer answer. They do not see Ysoria. They do not need to. The paper has already spoken for her. A distant door closes. The sound echoes once, then disappears. Rain continues to fall outside, washing reflections down the glass towers until it is impossible to tell where one light ends and another begins. The city will adjust. It always does. New custodians will rise. New assumptions will form. But something fundamental has shifted. Ysoria Bellweather remains where she is, unmoved, unmarked. She does not watch the rain. She does not look back toward the offices now unraveling. There is nothing left for her there. The hallway holds its breath around her. The ring is still. The image freezes.